I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that and I enjoy that change. I don't fear it. That's the bit that excites me, is the idea of being able to bring some change. Not overly radical change, but changes that I think...
Prince William wasn't looking for a scandal. He was looking for one missing file. But according to persistent palace rumors, the moment he realized his father's official schedule didn't match what senior advisors had supposedly been discussing behind closed doors, everything changed. The deeper he looked, the stranger it became. Drafts didn't match final versions. Routine requests stalled without explanation. Meetings that should have appeared on internal calendars seemed to vanish. And before long, whispers inside royal circles were asking an uncomfortable question. Was someone quietly controlling what information reached the heir to the throne? If those whispers were true, this wasn't just about paperwork anymore. It was about influence. It was about trust. And it was about why Prince William reportedly decided to take control himself, leading to the emergence of secret files that some insiders claim marked the end of one of Queen Camilla's last major royal responsibilities. But before anyone reached that point, one routine document landed on William's desk, and one tiny inconsistency set the entire chain of events in motion. The folder stopped halfway through Prince William's hands.
When William came home unexpectedly for the weekend from Eton, Camilla offered to leave, but Charles thought it right that they get it over with. He took her to the flat William had at Clarence House and left them to talk for half an hour. According to Penny Jr., at the end of the conversation, Camilla came out saying, "I need a drink."
Tea was only a schedule. Hundreds like it had crossed his desk over the years. Yet this one refused to make sense. The afternoon light spilled across the polished desk inside Kensington Palace as he scanned another page. A Commonwealth summit, a memorial service, state receptions, diplomatic meetings. Every major engagement for the coming months still placed the king at the center of events. William slowly closed the folder. According to whispers circulating through palace corridors in this fictional story, private discussions had already begun about easing the king's workload. If those conversations had truly happened, why had absolutely nothing changed on paper? The contradiction was impossible to ignore. If stories of hidden palace struggles and royal mysteries are the kind of investigations you enjoy following, take a moment to subscribe now, because every document uncovered in this fictional story leads to an even bigger question than the one before it. Hi viewers, if you discovered that someone close to your own family was quietly keeping important information from everyone else, would you confront them immediately, or would you first gather proof? Tell everyone your answer in the comments. William did neither, not yet. He reached toward another cabinet and pulled out an earlier planning file, intending to compare the latest schedule with the preliminary version circulated several weeks before. The cabinet was organized with military precision. Every folder had its place. Every archive carried a reference number. Except one. The earlier schedule had disappeared. For several long seconds he simply stared at the empty space. Nobody in the palace misplaced official planning documents, especially not records connected to the sovereign's public program. A lesser man might have dismissed it as routine administration. William could not. His attention shifted back to the latest schedule. He began reading every line again. Not quickly, methodically. Every ceremony, every overseas visit, every audience, every reception, every handwritten notation. Nothing had been delegated. Nothing had been reassigned. Nothing suggested the institution was preparing for any adjustment whatsoever. The more he examined it, the stranger it became. In this fictional account, rumors had circulated for months that senior advisors were quietly discussing ways to protect the king's energy by gradually transferring selected responsibilities to the Prince of Wales. If those discussions had taken place, where had they gone? Because the official paperwork reflected the exact opposite. Instead of becoming lighter, the king's calendar appeared even heavier. William leaned back without taking his eyes off the documents. He wasn't thinking like a prince anymore. He was thinking like someone trying to solve a puzzle. Every investigation begins with one contradiction, one detail that refuses to fit. This schedule had become that detail. Minutes later, Catherine entered the office, carrying several briefing papers of her own. She noticed immediately that William hadn't moved. His attention remained fixed on the same page.
It's terrible that after 50 years it is behind closed doors, and I've no intention. Now I've started to stop now. I'm determined to put an end to this.
Without saying a word, she placed the papers down beside him. He slid the schedule toward her. She quietly read through several entries. Nothing about the list appeared unusual at first glance. Then she noticed the dates. One event followed another with barely enough time to travel between them. Several overseas commitments were followed almost immediately by lengthy ceremonial appearances back in Britain. Even someone in perfect health would struggle to maintain that pace. She looked back toward William. Neither of them needed to finish the thought. The silence completed it. If the schedule truly reflected the final plan, someone had ignored every discussion about reducing pressure on the king. Or perhaps those discussions had never reached the people responsible for approving the calendar. Neither possibility was reassuring. William finally spoke, not with anger, with quiet certainty. Something had happened between recommendation and approval. Somewhere inside the administrative process, the story had changed. He wasn't accusing anyone. He wasn't drawing conclusions. He simply recognized a pattern that demanded an explanation. Within the hour, he contacted the Palace Coordination Office. His request was straightforward. He asked for the previous draft schedules, the accompanying planning notes, and the latest administrative brief explaining why no duties had been reassigned. The response arrived surprisingly fast. The documents would be forwarded shortly. Hours passed. Nothing arrived. The following morning, another reply appeared. The files were still being processed. Another day passed. A different explanation followed. Some documents required additional review before distribution. William read every message carefully. Each answer sounded professional.
It was a very sensitive, difficult time for Camilla, because even though, she was the long-term girlfriend, well established with Charles, she often wasn't allowed to sit with him, particularly at big state occasions. And the final straw, by all accounts, came.
Each answer sounded reasonable. Together they created something deeply unreasonable. Every explanation delayed the same request. That was when the feeling changed. Curiosity became concern. Concern slowly became resolve. He ordered no confrontation, raised no voice, made no accusations. Instead, he opened a fresh notebook. Across the top of the first page, he wrote 3 simple words: "Find the originals." It would become the first step in an investigation that, within this fictional story, would eventually uncover forgotten archives, confidential memoranda, and sealed files capable of changing far more than a single royal schedule. And William had absolutely no idea that someone else, somewhere inside the palace, was already watching every request he made. The heavy mahogany door of the private study slams shut, cutting off the muffled echo of an argument in the hallway outside. A fountain pen rolls across the desk, leaving a streak of dark ink across a stack of restricted transfer logs, but Prince William does not move to stop it. His fingers remain fixed on an official registry sheet, where a gaping hole in the timeline stares back at him. November 14th, 2024. 6 weeks of internal communications between the highest offices of the household simply do not exist in the public record. There are no registry receipts, no dispatch notes, and no archive reference codes. It is as if 6 weeks of royal governance were wiped clean from the official books before the public ever knew they took place. The air inside the room feels suffocatingly cold. Rain beats against the tall glass windows, casting jagged shadows across rows of leather-bound volumes that have sat untouched for decades. William reaches for a desk telephone, bypassing the standard switchboard to dial a direct, unmonitored line. Within 40 minutes, 3 individuals arrive separately through a rear entrance usually reserved for maintenance staff. A former senior legal officer, a forensic document auditor, and a trusted administrative strategist quietly file into the room. They do not carry briefcases or tablets. Every note taken during this meeting will be recorded on physical paper and destroyed before dawn. William spreads the ledger sheets across the long conference table, using heavy brass paperweights to pin down the curling edges. The advisors lean in close under the dim light of a single desk lamp, scanning rows of tracking codes and authorization signatures. For nearly an hour, the only sound in the room is the rhythmic turning of paper and the low hum of the heating pipes.
The interaction feels formal and possibly forced. While we don't know the exact context of this picture, we do know that Camilla had told friends at this point that she was surprised at the unexpected side to William that she had found. "The boy's got a temper," she apparently said. In Robert Lacey's book, Battle of the Brothers, he writes,
When the senior legal officer finally looks up, his expression carries the weight of a severe constitutional warning. He cautions that tracing these files further risks stepping into dangerous territory. Questioning internal household handling, especially records connected to senior administrative roles, could trigger an institutional firestorm that no communications team could contain. The room breaks into a sharp, hushed debate. The administrative strategist argues for immediate caution, urging William to allow the internal discrepancies to remain buried under standard bureaucratic oversight. To pull on this specific thread is to risk untangling relationships and agreements that have held the household together through years of public scrutiny. But William stands firm at the head of the table. He refuses to allow convenience to overrule integrity. He argues that a modern monarchy cannot survive on selective memory and hidden ledgers. If there are gaps in the official narrative, he insists on knowing precisely who created them and why. The team begins a systematic reconstruction of the document trail, mapping every physical movement of the files across the palace network over the last decade. They cross-reference courier receipts, security gate logs, and internal routing slips. Patterns quickly begin to emerge from the chaos. Documents regarding sensitive ceremonial appointments and administrative oversight were not simply lost in transit. They were intentionally rerouted through a specialized, highly restricted sub-office before reaching their final destination. In dozens of instances, files that should have taken 24 hours to process were held in administrative isolation for weeks at a time, emerging only after key details had been quietly edited or removed entirely. If you are watching this right now and planning to scroll away without hitting that subscribe button, ask yourself why you walk away just as the truth begins to unravel. True royal history is not for passive viewers who turn their backs when the evidence becomes uncomfortable. Thousands of people watch these investigations every single day while keeping this channel in the dark, pretending they care about transparency while withholding the single click that allows us to keep digging into these hidden palace files. Do not be the person who stays silent while the real story is swept under the rug. Hit the subscribe button right now, turn on notifications, and prove that you care about uncovering the complete, unvarnished truth before it is buried for good. With the mid-script review complete, the investigation presses deeper into the labyrinth of administrative records. The forensic auditor points out a recurring anomaly in the authorization signatures attached to the delayed files. While the official paperwork carries the expected departmental stamps, the internal routing logs contain secondary initials added long after the original approvals were logged. These secondary markings consistently appear on documents concerning ceremonial duties, archive access, and the allocation of administrative staff attached to Queen Camilla's official office. The discovery introduces a troubling question into the investigation. Were these routing changes made as routine administrative updates, or did they represent a deliberate effort to alter how authority was distributed behind palace walls? The legal team warns that without original, unedited physical records, proving intent remains virtually impossible. Every digital record within the modern system has been standardized to reflect the current administrative balance, making it look as though every decision followed long-established protocol. The paper trail ends in a vault that requires high-level security clearances to access. Just as the debate over how to proceed reaches a standstill, a secure landline telephone on the side table rings. The sound cuts through the heavy silence of the study like an alarm. William steps away from the table and picks up the receiver. On the line is an elderly, hesitant voice belonging to a retired private secretary who served the royal household for over 30 years before quietly stepping down in the late 2010s. The retired official speaks in measured, cautious tones, making it clear that he is aware of the internal review currently taking place. He warns William that the digital archives he is searching through have already been sanitized. The retired secretary makes a single, startling request. He asks for a completely confidential meeting, away from royal residences, away from official vehicles, and far beyond the range of palace security details. He claims to hold material that was removed from the official registry years ago for safekeeping. Material that answers precisely why the document trail was altered. The call ends as abruptly as it began, leaving the study in total silence once again. 2 hours later, a nondescript black sedan pulls onto a quiet, unlit gravel lane on the perimeter of a rural estate miles outside of London. Rain continues to pour, drumming against the roof of the car as William sits in the passenger seat, flanked by a single plainclothes security officer. A figure wearing a heavy trench coat emerges from the darkness and steps into the rear seat of the vehicle, shaking water from his umbrella. The retired secretary does not offer formal pleasantries. From inside a worn leather briefcase, he pulls out a thick folder, tied with faded ribbon, and places it directly onto William's lap. Inside the folder are original, carbon copy transfer records dating back to the crucial transition periods of the monarchy. As William shines a penlight across the yellowed pages, the chilling reality becomes immediately clear. The original physical documents bear signatures, approval stamps, and specific conditional clauses that do not exist anywhere in the official digital archives kept at the palace today. The original records reveal that major administrative responsibilities transferred over the last decade were never meant to be permanent. They show a clear, documented record of unauthorized alterations that systematically changed who held ultimate authority over confidential royal decisions. William stares at the physical paper in his hands, realizing that the story told to the public for years was built on a carefully managed illusion. The UV light flickers over the brittle, yellowed paper, illuminating ghostly traces of erased ink that the naked eye was never meant to see. Prince William presses a magnifying lens against the page, watching as faint, handwritten marginalia emerges from the shadows of a 40-year-old administrative memo. Beside him, a forensic examiner adjusts a digital scanner, capturing high-resolution scans of every watermarked seal. The room is dead silent, save for the hum of the blue ultraviolet bulb and the frantic scraping of a pencil taking technical notes. The document sitting on the glass table is the original transfer charter from 1988, and the faded ink in the margins proves that key clauses governing senior household authority were physically scraped off the paper before the file was ever scanned into the modern digital system. Every single word on this paper represents a quiet, deliberate rewrite of institutional protocol. For 6 straight hours inside the secure vault beneath the private estate, William and his legal team meticulously lay the recovered carbon copies side by side with the current official registry entries. The contrast is devastating, where the original text explicitly stated that ceremonial oversight and archive access belonged exclusively to the reigning sovereign and their designated heir. The modified versions currently used by the palace staff grant sweeping administrative veto powers to secondary offices. It is an intricate, bureaucratic web designed to shift influence away from the crown without ever raising a public alarm. The legal team works with cold, methodical speed. They test the chemical composition of the ink, run spectral analyses on the paper fiber, and verify the physical signatures against historical control samples. Every test comes back with the same chilling conclusion. The documents provided by the retired secretary are completely authentic, while the files stored in the official palace archives are unauthorized, altered copies. William paces the length of the room, his expression darkened by the realization that generations of palace administrators have been operating under rules that were quietly rewritten behind closed doors. Catherine steps into the dim light of the vault, her quiet presence breaking the heavy atmosphere of technical analysis. She does not look at the legal reports or the spectral charts. Instead, she looks directly at William, watching the silent strain etched across his face. She reaches out, placing a firm hand on his arm, forcing him to pause his relentless pacing. She reminds him that anger and haste are dangerous luxuries in an investigation of this scale. A single false step, a single unverified claim, or a public push based on incomplete facts could destroy the very institution they are fighting to protect. She urges him to remain patient, to let the legal team verify every comma and every stamp, ensuring that when the truth is finally brought to light, no one inside or outside the palace walls can can challenge its authenticity. If you are planning to close this video right now without subscribing, you are actively choosing to ignore the truth while it is being exposed. Most people claim they want real accountability, yet they refuse to take 3 seconds to support the independent work required to bring these hidden palace files into the open. You watch the story unfold, you consume the evidence, and then you leave without clicking subscribe, allowing the very people hiding these records to win. Stop being a passive bystander, subscribe to this channel right now, turn on your notifications, and stand with those who demand total transparency before these revelations are buried permanently. The forensic team turns its attention to the physical routing slips attached to the altered charters. Using infrared imaging, they begin to trace the timeline of when the physical modifications were made. The ink degradation indicates that the primary edits were carried out during a critical transition period in the early 2010s, precisely when major structural responsibilities were being reorganized across the royal household. The records reveal that specific recommendations regarding workload distribution, public engagements, and the management of private royal trusts were systematically rewritten during administrative reviews. As the team dives deeper into the routing codes, they uncover a crucial pattern. Every altered charter contains a specific reference code that directs administrative staff to a secondary, restricted archive code. The forensic auditor inputs the code into a secure offline database, pulling up a long buried index of sealed memos. Among the files is a confidential memorandum directly referencing recommendations that altered the oversight of Queen Camilla's final remaining administrative responsibilities. The file indicates that authority over key ceremonial appointments and private household funds was quietly consolidated under her office during the administrative overhaul, bypassing standard parliamentary and household review processes. The revelation hits the room with crushing force. The altered documents were not just minor bureaucratic errors or routine administrative updates. They were part of a coordinated effort that effectively restructured the balance of internal power for over a decade. The legal team lays out the complete chain of custody, showing precisely how the modifications were introduced, who signed off on the routing transfers, and how the official digital system was manipulated to hide the original terms of governance. The evidence is complete, authenticated, and undeniable. William stands over the final compiled report, staring at the thick binder that now holds the complete paper trail of the investigation. The legal team advises that the findings carry severe constitutional implications that reach far beyond administrative protocol. The choice before him is no longer about gathering evidence. It is about what must be done with the truth now that it has been uncovered. Leaving the documents buried would allow an unauthorized system to continue, but presenting them means confronting the highest levels of the household structure. Catherine looks at the finalized dossier, then back at William, her voice steady and resolute. She agrees that the time for quiet investigation has passed. The evidence cannot be resolved by committees, legal advisors, or media strategists. William closes the heavy binder, his decision finalized. He instructs his team to prepare a formal briefing folder for an immediate, unscripted meeting. Recognizing the immense weight of the findings, William decides that only King Charles can determine what happens next once he is presented with the authenticated truth. The heavy oak door of the sovereign's private sitting room in Buckingham Palace clicks shut with a deafening finality, locking out the flurry of aides in the grand corridor. King Charles sits in a high-backed armchair, his face drawn with fatigue, staring at the thick leather folder Prince William has just placed on the low table between them. No greetings are spoken, no pleasantries are exchanged. William sits opposite his father, unbinding the black ribbon holding the dossier together, laying out the original 1988 carbon charters directly alongside the modified digital printouts. The silence in the room is suffocating, broken only by the sharp, rhythmic tick of a golden carriage clock on the marble mantelpiece. Senior legal counsel steps forward into the dim light, speaking in hushed, precise tones as he points out the physical evidence of altered seals and falsified routing logs. The king puts on his reading glasses, his hands trembling slightly, as his eyes trace the infrared scans, revealing where original clauses were scraped away decades ago. For long minutes, Charles reads in complete silence. The psychological weight of the revelation fills the room. He is looking at proof that the administrative integrity of his household was compromised, that decisions governing ceremonial appointments and private archive control were executed under modified authorities he never explicitly granted. William watches his father intently, observing the slow transition on the king's face, from disbelief to grave, quiet anger. The monarch asks a single, sharp question about who verified the physical documents. The senior auditor confirms that independent forensic testing leaves zero doubt. The modified records currently governing daily palace operations are illegitimate copies. William presents the administrative restructuring plan prepared by his legal team. It is not an act of hostility or personal retaliation, but a necessary surgical correction to preserve the crown's future. The plan demands an immediate revocation of altered administrative mandates and the complete transfer of affected oversight duties directly to the office of the heir apparent. King Charles leans back, closing his eyes as he processes the massive structural shift being asked of him. To sign these executive orders is to acknowledge an internal failure that lasted for years. Yet to refuse is to leave the monarchy vulnerable to catastrophic exposure. The king opens his eyes, reaches for his private fountain pen, and signs his name to the royal instruments of transfer. With a few swift strokes of ink, responsibility for key ceremonial functions, archive governance, and administrative oversight shifts entirely to William. Within the fictional framework of this narrative, this decisive legal action effectively brings Queen Camilla's final major administrative role inside the household structure to an abrupt and final end. If you are thinking about closing this window right now without clicking that subscribe button, ask yourself why you walk away when the truth demands your support. Thousands of viewers consume these deep investigations every single day, taking the information for granted while refusing to perform one simple action that keeps this work alive. When you leave without subscribing, you actively enable the culture of secrecy that keeps these hidden files in the dark. Do not be complicit in hiding the reality of power struggles behind closed doors. Hit the subscribe button this instant, turn on notifications, and prove that you stand for uncompromising transparency before these critical records are buried forever. With the legal instruments signed, a heavy sense of relief briefly settles over the private sitting room. The legal advisors begin gathering the signed pages, carefully organizing them into official dispatch boxes to be processed by the Privy Council office. The long, exhausting investigation seems to have finally reached its logical conclusion. The authority of the heir is established, the corrupted routing channels are severed, and the governance of the household is restored to its rightful, transparent legal standing. Everyone in the room believes the matter is entirely settled. The senior legal officer snaps shut his briefcase, and the king motions for his private secretary to bring tea. But as William reaches down to organize his remaining notes, his hand touches a thick, unmarked brown folder that had remained at the very bottom of the primary dossier. It is a sealed document, bound in heavy red wax that has never been broken, bearing a handwritten classification code that does not match any entry in the palace register. The room freezes once again. The advisors glance at each other with visible unease, realizing that this final file was not included in the formal briefing materials just reviewed. William hesitates, his fingers resting on the cracked red wax, sensing that whatever lies inside this untouched envelope holds the potential to shift the ground beneath them once more. King Charles sets his pen down on the table, his gaze locking onto the mysterious folder with sudden, intense scrutiny. He raises a hand to hold back the departing staff, asking directly for that final sealed file to be opened and read before anyone leaves the room. The heavy red wax seal snaps with a dry crack that echoes through the silence of the private sitting room. Chaboti. Prince William slides the single sheet of yellowed paper from the unmarked envelope, his eyes locking onto a handwritten date stamped at the top margin. August 20th, 2011. It is a strictly confidential memorandum signed by former household officials, laying out a calculated strategy to quietly stall formal succession planning and modern oversight protocols within administrative channels indefinitely. The memo stops short of offering concrete proof of criminal intent, yet the paper trail exposes a deliberate effort to shield secondary offices from future scrutiny, ensuring that crucial administrative power remained frozen in place for over a decade. King Charles takes the document into his hands, reading the sharp, deliberate sentences written by men who managed the crown in secret. A profound stillness settles over the monarch, the realization that key administrative processes were deliberately slowed to protect personal influence cut deeper than any public criticism ever could. The king sets the memo onto the table, his choice clear. He declares that the era of hidden ledgers and buried memos ends today. Total transparency is no longer a strategic choice, it is the absolute condition for the monarchy's survival. William accepts his expanded role, stepping into full oversight of administrative and ceremonial governance with a solemn sense of responsibility. Beside him, Catherine observes the quiet shift in authority, reflecting on the immense weight of restored trust. The structural power struggle that quietly divided the palace for years comes to a close, paving the way for an era defined by openness, modernized governance, and total accountability. If you are thinking of walking away now without liking, sharing, and hitting that subscribe button, ask yourself why you choose to ignore the truth after it has been dragged into the light. Thousands of people watch these investigative deep dives, taking the countless hours of research for granted while refusing to click one button to support independent work. When you leave without subscribing, you enable the very culture of secrecy that kept these documents buried in dark vaults for decades. Do not be the person who turns a blind eye to history. Hit the subscribe button right now, turn on notifications, share this video with everyone who needs to know the truth, and prove that you stand for full transparency. Yet, just as the team begins cataloging the updated files to settle the official record once and for all, an archivist pulling down a heavy registry ledger from the vault walls discovers a false back panel hidden inside a 90-year-old oak cabinet. Tucked inside the dark recess is a velvet-bound ledger marked with a red cross and a handwritten ledger entry referencing a secondary, uncatalogued vault beneath St. George's Chapel. The notes contain explicit references to financial ledgers and private letters that were never handed over during the modern audits, including a personal directive bearing the signature of King George VI regarding the permanent removal of line of succession files. What lies inside that secondary chapel vault threatens to undo everything William just fought to establish, and you cannot afford to miss the next episode as we unlock those forgotten doors for the very first time.